Hey, DM Dango here with another review from the DM's Guild. This time we're looking at Mines of Chult. There can't be that many, can there? So, the Mines of Chult. What are you getting in this collection of adventures? You're getting 9 adventures that range from ranges from all the way from like very first levels, from 1 to 4, all the way up to the higher stuff like from 9 to 12-ish. And included in there is also a module that says it can be used for any level, but I'll go into that later. So I'm going to pick and choose 3 of the adventures from each of the authors, because this was written by 3 different authors. So I want to kind of showcase each of their in different styles slightly in each one. That way I can pick one and go, this is the one I like from this one, and this is the one I like from this author, and this is the one I like from this author. And that way we get a better spread in terms of what's being on offer here. Because they all have different, slightly different writing styles. One of the things I will mention overall, though, is there is enough consistency across the adventures in order for you to not feel like there's a big jar between. There's not an incredible writer and a very amateurish one. They're all very well done, and they're all very kind of well constructed and put together. One of the things that I did like across all of the adventures is that there are a lot of lore kind of seeped into each adventure to allow them to be kind of more branched out into full-fleshed worlds, and so that you can actually go, okay, well, this happened in this one, and this can kind of branch off into these little mini adventures, or potentially into other adventures that these authors have written. And I think that's on purpose, and it's very well done. As I mentioned, the title of the adventures is The Mines of Chult. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean you have to run these as part of the Tomb of Annihilation series, but they are designed for that kind of thing. If you've ever looked at the map of Chult, it has, every so often you'll see a small pickaxe and shovel symbol on the map, and that designates a mine. Now, the original authors, I suspect, had plans to include small adventures as part of that, to kind of like give you something to do in those mines. It probably never made it in. Thankfully, the DM's Guild's guys have come along and they've kind of filled that gap, which is a great thing to see. One more thing that I liked about across here, there is a small box, and I'll try to put an image over here as to what this looks like. Essentially, it's a small box to have kind of what do the general features of an area look like? Things like, well, if it's a mine, it's going to be, it has rocky floors, gravels everywhere, there are occasional wooden beams holding up the support structures, those kinds of things. And it's nice to have that at the very beginning, because it gives you a good framing tool to say, well, this is what the overall mine looks like. And then if something is unusual or different in the individual sections, you can call those out in a more detailed description. Say, well, it is the mine, it has these features already, but in addition, it also has this thing, this pedestal that is incredibly dangerous. The first adventure I'm going to go through is A Time of Our Lives. And I can spoil this bit. I was hesitant to do so if you just saw, because I don't want to give away too much. I want you to kind of experience it, but I think given the premise of this adventure, it'll be fairly quick before you hit this thing. It's a time loop adventure. So essentially your players will run through a point, and then something will happen, and then they'll go back to the start. Usually in the time loop adventure, it results in the player's deaths, and then they jump to the start. I can really see a lot of players enjoying this. However, he does make the point, which is really a good one, and it's good to see, because he understands that some players may find this annoying. He's kind of saying, well, don't play it up too much, because you can just annoy your players. But I can see like a really good role play. For example, your player steps forth onto a glyph. It glows bright, hot red and envelops them in flames. Slowly as they seep up around them, the time seeming to slow down as it covers their eyes, and then blackness. Oi, mate, what are you sure? Are you sure you want to go in there? It's quite dangerous. And you're talking back with the gnome again. That kind of jarring jump is really interesting. It gets players' minds kind of twirling and whirling to kind of figure out what just happened. I was dying, but I didn't die. I love that kind of not trick the players, but get the players' minds working, get them to turn and move and to actually think. It gives them a lot of impetus. And actually, once they work this out, from a time loop perspective, in terms of like the trope itself, imagine you've got an idea that your players are a bit too trepidatious, they're a bit too cautious. If they all of a sudden know they can't die, hopefully this will solve that. And you'll see some very aggressive, very interesting actions in terms of a no consequences framework. And then once the consequences are back in play, maybe some of that starts seeping back in to see, maybe they're a bit less cautious. Maybe they're a bit more free to the wind, I hope. The second one that I really liked was The Wounded Earth. And now I like this one, and unfortunately there's not a lot I can say around this one, because the reason I like this is because it has a really great story. The premise is really good in terms of what's happening. At a start, at a very high level, you have an ancient guardian that's been sitting in underground for eons, kind of thing, and it's been woken up. But it's only been partially woken up, so it's releasing kind of psychic screams outward into the jungles, into the outer areas, to say, I'm awake, I'm awake, I'm awake, I'm angry, I'm afraid, I don't know what's happening. And it's a really interesting idea to go down into this mine to find this creature that your players are going to have a really interesting time with this, because they're going to be like, well, I don't want to kill this thing, but I do want to kill this thing kind of bit. And it's just like a little of an odd mix of stuff. And there's a lot of interesting characters that are like pulled in as part of this to say, well, here's this character that thinks this, and here's this one that thinks that. It's a really cool thing. I also really like, there's a monster that's included in this, and I really wish I don't want to spoil it because it's amazing. Suffice to say, it has to do with coins, and is a brilliant idea as a monster. Now, I worry some players will get annoyed by this, but I think they'll find it really funny, especially when it's happening to them or to other people. A bit of schadenfreude, I think is the word for it. So finally, I'm going to go on to the last one. Now, this one's a bit of a contentious one because I'm a little worried about this, because this came up in Twitter a couple of days ago about venture modules that are written in such a way that they could be played for any level. Now, this one is written that way. Now, what he's done is he's created a new tool. He has a concept called average party level. And what he's done is he's taken that and gone, well, here's a thing that will allow you to calculate CR scaling based on this. An average party level is essentially you take all the total levels of all the party levels, party members, add them up, and then divide the sum by the number of characters, and then rounding up if you get a half or whatever. And that gives you your party's like challenge rating, essentially. And then you use that to figure out how difficult or complex or interesting your combat situations need to be. Now, there is some caveats to this, and I think this is where one of the things that I dislike about these kind of systems is that higher level characters deal with puzzle problems very differently than lower level characters. Lower level characters have to use mechanical situations. They have to physically do things in most cases. Magic doesn't really come into play in terms of that kind of side of thing until much later. When you're talking about higher level characters, the way they manage problems is that they tend to take a blunt hammer. There's like an old adage about something like, all your parties will probably become murder hobos if you leave them alone too long. And that's kind of the same kind of situation with magic in terms of solving problems. Eventually it becomes a point when you can just use a hammer magic to solve a problem. Now, I don't think that the problems that are presented here are necessarily solvable by that hammer, which is a good thing. It means that the premise that he's trying to get across is actually really good. I worry some DMs will see this and go, ooh, any level? Are you sure that's any level? I think it probably is. I think as long as you go by the guidance in the adventure module. Sorry, I don't know why that was so hard to say. In the adventure module, it will work for your party level as long as you follow the guidelines that are presented. Now, so those are the 3 adventures that I picked out. Now, overall, these are really well written. They are very well done. There's only one minor plot hole that I think exists within one of the adventures, and it's a minor one. It's only a pet peeve of mine in terms of like monster motivation kind of thing. And I'll DM the author on this one specifically so that I don't spoil anything. But overall, it's really well put together. The maps included are really nice. One of them is actually a side view map, so you get a kind of a level system, like more like in a proper mine if it were to go down and then you go across. I haven't seen very many of those done, and this one looks to be done very well. I can imagine it kind of confusing on some players to go, well, is the mine then like 5 feet wide? Well, no, but it's because there's so many levels, it's easier to kind of display it this way. It's also nice that they've kind of standardized the way and the form the adventures are all taking. So each of them has the same, not style, but what's the word for this? Form? No. Structure. Each adventure has the same structure, which means that they feel consistent across all of them. Sorry. Now, there are a lot of things to like in things. There's a lot of really interesting mechanics. There's a lot of really interesting monsters. I mentioned the coins, and I mentioned some of the other things. It's nice to see certain other bits. There's some notes about, well, if you have this background, you get advantage on these checks. It's nice to see that included in terms of like a way for DMs to go, oh, okay, that kind of makes sense. And then maybe incorporate that into their own games. It's a kind of like a teaching a little bit in that. And I always like to see where adventures can teach me something about how to run the game better. Finally, my rating though. I think... So this is currently on the DM's Guild for $6.95. At that price, you could not go wrong with this. If you have adventures that like deal with mines or like to deal with mines, or you're in Chult, you really can't go wrong with this. $6.95 is a pretty good value for the amount you're getting in terms of it doesn't matter when or where you're in Chult at the time, or where in the cycle of Tomb of Annihilation you are. There is probably one of these mines that you can insert and go, well, here's the mine. Would you like to go visit it? Or if your players accidentally start wandering that way, you go, well, maybe this might be useful. And I think it would be. It doesn't really matter where they are, because they can always, there's a mine. There are mines, I'm looking at the map now, there are mines all over the bloody place. And you can always add a new one, to be fair. So, all in all, I think this is a 5 for me. It is really well put together. The criticisms I have are minor at best. If I was going to give any detraction for anything, there is one thing that I kind of thought was a little weird. I would have liked to see that then ordered in challenge rating rather than blocks of authors. I get why it's done that way, but it would have been nice to have them kind of all like in challenge rating order, so you could read through them slowly. So if you have like a party of level 5s, you can go, okay, where's the level 5 one? It's there. Boom, I just go to this page. It would be nice just from that perspective, but it's not necessary. It's not necessary. Anyways, thank you for watching. Please do remember to like and subscribe and comment down below if you have any questions or any ideas for the channel. And thank you. Peace out.